The man was merely a bystander, yet somehow ended up becoming the center of the spectacle himself. He couldn't understand it either. Why would the daughter of a rival family present him with a laurel crown, a symbol of love? He even quietly reminded the girl, "Have you mistaken me for someone else? The one you're looking for, Li Jihao, is the dark-haired knight behind me." He encouraged her to walk over slowly, but the girl insisted firmly that she had not made a mistake. She even promised him he wouldn't need to take any responsibility. All he had to do was accept her laurel crown, because all of this was the girl's starting point for escaping her family's control and carrying out her plan for revenge. The girl's name was Nadia. In her previous life, as an illegitimate daughter of the Bart family, from the very moment she was born, her tragic fate was sealed. Because of her illegitimate status, she was not only treated as a punching bag by her half-sister, but also used by her father as a puppet of the family. Her standing in the household was even lower than that of the servants. This life continued until the appearance of the man who ended her tragic previous existence. The man's name was Li Jihao. He was a foreigner summoned by the kingdom during its unification. As a mercenary, he demonstrated extraordinary ability. The family recognized Li Jihao's potential and sought to win him over. And Nadia, as the Bart family's asset, naturally became the most ideal means of drawing Li Jihao in. And so the two were naturally united in marriage. In that moment, a flicker of hope reignited on the girl's face, which had been as expressionless as still water. But not long after the wedding, that tiny glimmer of hope was shattered by the very family members she had once trusted so deeply. At a ball, she was set up by her sister and forced to end up alone with a strange man. When the girl came to, she found herself in full view of everyone. For the sake of the family's reputation and Lord Li Jihao's honor, the girl was thrown into prison. In her cell, the girl clenched her fists in fury and demanded to know from her sister Karen why she and their father had conspired to frame her. Her sister laughed at her naivety in response. A scandal this enormous, one that had shaken the entire nobility. Did she really think it could have been pulled off by just her and their father alone? If Li Jihao hadn't turned a blind eye, they wouldn't have dared to set her up. Her sister even told her spitefully, "The Li Jihao of today is not the man he once was. To dissolve the marriage with you." This plan might very well have been Lord Li Jihao's own idea. The woman felt as though she had been hollowed out. Her eyes went blank as she murmured, "If he wanted to dissolve the marriage, he could have just told me directly. I would have agreed without a word of protest." Seeing that her sister's heart and mind had already been torn to pieces, the sister clapped her hands, ready to carry out the final step of this cruel plan. That face full of smiles, then spoke the most vicious words. "A bastard like you, of course, only deserves to be with the lowest of servants." Moments later, two large men walked in. After being subjected to torment, the girl was strangled by a man with a rope. In her final moments, she recalled everything she had endured from childhood to now, unconditionally obeying her father, having to watch her stepmother's every expression as a child. And whenever she had something good, it was always snatched away by her half-sister. And in the end, to die in such a humiliating way. She thought it was all over. But then, when she opened her eyes again, she had returned to a day when she was 20 years old. After managing to calm herself down, she knew this was the chance heaven had given her. With this opportunity, she would make them pay. The utterly selfish family, the sister who could still smile and even clap while watching her die, and the father who used her like a chess piece and then discarded her. She would have her revenge on all of them. The first step, deal with her personal maid, who was also Karen's spy. The cup of wine that had driven her to ruin had been given to her by that very maid. The maid was still as impatient with her as ever. It was impossible to tell who was the mistress and who was the servant. But this time, Nadia would not let herself be bullied like she had been. In her previous life, she slammed her hand hard on the table, and under the maid's startled gaze, she walked out of the room. Outside the room, the housekeeper reminded Nadia that the king had come to see the Duke, and that Nadia should get dressed and prepare to present herself. Before long, Nadia had finished getting ready and greeted her father with a bow. Her father still scolded her for arriving late. The look in his eyes was as though he were regarding something utterly insignificant. He then walked ahead on his own and instructed Nadia that he would be recommending to the king that, at the triumphal ceremony, Nadia present Li Jihao with the laurel crown, and that she simply had to agree. Since ancient times, the triumphal ceremony has had a tradition. A noble young lady presents a laurel crown to the hero, a gesture that symbolizes a confession of love. However, in this triumphal ceremony, there was a lord who belonged to the north, the sworn enemy of their south. And so, her father intended to use a marriage alliance to win over Li Jihao. If Nadia agreed, the outcome would be the same as in her previous life. So she had to quickly devise a plan to escape them. Arriving at the meeting room, the king was already waiting inside. It was clear he attached great importance to this triumphal ceremony. He said that this triumphal ceremony had been proposed by the Karl Expeditionary Force. And among the commanders of the expeditionary force, it was the northern Marquis Winter, who had contributed the most, as the South's sworn enemy. This made the king deeply wary of him. He absolutely could not allow him to complete the triumphal ceremony without a hitch. The Duke's proposed strategy was to have Nadia present Li Jihao with the laurel crown, so that Marquis Winter would not become the central figure of the ceremony. He also suggested the king use his royal authority to arrange a marriage for Marquis Winter with a noble lady from the south. This way, it would not only win over Li Jihao, but also prevent Marquis Winter from becoming the star of the triumphal occasion, and break apart the marriage alliances among the northern lords, truly killing 3 birds with 1 stone. After hearing the Duke's plan, Nadia's mind sparked with a bold idea. What if she were the one to present the laurel crown to Marquis Winter? Not only could she escape from her family and Li Jihao, she could even achieve revenge for her previous life. Thinking this through, Nadia did not immediately raise the idea with the king. She needed to wait for the right moment. The king quietly pondered for a moment, then raised a key question. Who would be willing to send their own daughter into the lion's den? Nadia smiled knowingly. Her moment had come. She said that as the daughter of Duke Bart, she was willing to venture into enemy territory to relieve the king of his burden. When the Duke saw that Nadia had disrupted his original plan, he angrily reprimanded her and told her to be quiet. But at this moment, Nadia turned a deaf ear to her father's scolding. The success or failure of her revenge plan hinged on this very moment. She knew full well that as long as the king agreed, her father would have no recourse. Have you lost your mind? You actually want to marry Marquis Winter? He is our family's sworn enemy. The girl's name was Nadia. As an illegitimate daughter from the moment she was born, she became a pawn of the family. From childhood, she suffered not only the abuse of her legitimate half-sister Karen, but her own happiness also became a bargaining chip in the family's marriage alliances. In the end, she was ruthlessly cast aside by her family, framed by both her family and her husband, and died a wrongful death. After being reborn, Nadia swore to seek revenge against everyone who had wronged her in her previous life. So Nadia used the occasion of the triumphal ceremony to propose to the king that she marry the Marquis of the northern rival faction. This way she could escape her family's control and carry out her revenge plan. However, Nadia's proposal was clearly met with her father's opposition. After careful deliberation, His Majesty also felt it made sense. After all, as long-standing enemies, North and South, Marquis Winter could not possibly marry a woman from Southern family. Still, His Majesty asked the girl about it. Since it was she who had raised the request, she must surely have a foolproof plan. Nadia replied that the plan was simple. Just have her present the laurel crown to Marquis Winter. At the triumphal ceremony, a laurel crown was equivalent to a token of love. The Duke, upon hearing this, silently cursed her foolishness. Do you think he will simply accept your laurel crown? Nadia calmly replied that to date, there had never been a precedent of anyone refusing a laurel crown at a triumphal ceremony. And Marquis Winter could not possibly refuse, because this triumphal ceremony had been proposed by Marquis Winter himself. As the central figure of the ceremony, he would have no choice but to accept the girl's laurel crown. If he refused, the weight of public opinion would fall squarely on him. Though he was revered as a hero by all, if he rejected the girl's laurel crown, it would deal a devastating blow to his reputation. So, he would certainly accept the crown first, and then figure out how to deal with the fallout. After that, all His Majesty needed to do was apply pressure. After all, the moment he accepted the crown, he could no longer remain uninvolved. His Majesty listened and marveled. Truly a despicable scheme, yet the logic behind it was remarkably airtight. But after all, it involved sending a daughter into enemy territory, so the Duke's opinion still needed to be sought. The Duke, however, broke into a satisfied smile and agreed, telling His Majesty he would have his daughter present the crown. He hadn't expected this pawn of his to come up with such a scheme. Back home, Talion looked at her sister, who was acting strangely, and said, "Have you gone mad? Do you know who Marquis Winter is? How dare you stir up this kind of trouble?" The Duke, seeing his daughter acting foolishly, worried that Nadia might back out. He cut her off directly and stared her in the face, demanding to know why Nadia had such an idea. He had already arranged for her to present the laurel crown to Li Jihao. How dare she defy his orders? Faced with her father's interrogation, Nadia broke into a cold sweat from nerves. After all, even though His Majesty had already given his approval, if she couldn't convince the man before her, the plan still couldn't be carried out. After composing herself, Nadia summoned her courage and pushed back. "I have no wish to marry a foreigner of unknown origins. Even if I am illegitimate, I still carry the blood of the Bart family." The Duke retorted, questioning Nadia, "Is that your reason? For the sake of that insignificant pride of yours?" The seasoned Duke would clearly not be convinced by such a reason. At that moment, Nadia's heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might leap out of her chest. She decided to stake everything on a single gamble, a guess she had been holding in her mind. She turned the question back on her father. Surely the most pressing matter right now is preventing a northern rebellion, is it not? I imagine that is why both His Majesty and you wish to divert attention at the triumphal ceremony. Am I right? The Duke asked in surprise how she knew this. Seeing her father's expression, Nadia felt a wave of relief, for she understood that the royal family had in truth already become a puppet of the Bart family. The Duke's position was such that he could sway the king. But precisely because of this, the Duke needed to guard against uprisings from lords across the land. And among them, Marquis Winter of the North, as a most powerful force, was someone even the Duke greatly feared. So Nadia reminded her father, even without this triumphal ceremony, Marquis Winter would be quietly consolidating his power. So the most important thing right now was to send someone to keep watch over him, and she was willing to be that person. The Duke, upon hearing this, found it made good sense. Once the triumphal ceremony was over, Marquis Winter would return to the north, and they would lose the best opportunity to plant a spy. Finally, the Duke was persuaded by Nadia. Just then, her dim-witted sister burst in. If Nadia goes north, what about Li Jihao? The Duke looked at this foolish daughter of his and said dismissively, Li Jihao? Just find him another fiancé. The Duke then continued to question Nadia. What is it you truly want? Don't give me those high-sounding excuses. Nadia gripped her hands tightly, knowing she only had to answer this final question well. I want freedom. Marquis Winter is your sworn enemy. One day you will have him eliminated. When that day comes, please let me be a wealthy widow. At last, Nadia's negotiation with her father was a success. On the very first day after her rebirth, Nadia had freed herself from her engagement to Li Jihao. But this was only the first step of her revenge. The next thing to handle was the triumphal ceremony with Marquis Winter. Here it comes. The long-awaited triumphal ceremony finally began. Under the king's commendation, Jaren officially inherited his father's title. Next came the laurel crown presentation. At last, it was Nadia's turn to appear. Jaren looked at the laurel crown in the girl's hands and instantly understood why they had so readily agreed to hold the triumphal ceremony. It was nothing more than a ploy to muddy the waters. Seen in that light, the intended recipient of this laurel crown should have been Li Jihao. But his goal had already been achieved. He might as well think about how to bring up the matter of getting more funding from His Majesty. Unexpectedly, when he looked up, the girl was standing quietly right in front of him. Seeing the dazed look on her face, she was probably nervous because of the crowd. So Jaren quietly reminded the girl, are you too nervous and mistaking me for someone else? Li Jihao is the dark-haired knight behind me. You can walk over slowly now. Everyone will just take it as a small mix-up. But to his surprise, Nadia stared at him with wide eyes and said firmly that she had not made a mistake. This completely baffled Jaren. He asked Nadia what she meant by this. Unexpectedly, Nadia said that she had admired him for a very long time and that she believed Jaren was the man she could entrust her life to. Upon hearing this, Jaren's expression immediately darkened. You know the relationship between our two families. You should be well aware of what it means for you to present me with a laurel crown. Of course I know. I am confessing my feelings to you. The crowd below erupted in cheers. Seeing this, the king joined in the excitement, urging Jaren to accept quickly. Jaren knew full well this was a trap. He would not fall for it so easily. He used the excuse that the crown was too precious to deflect. Nadia watched Jaren's reaction and sighed inwardly. As expected, he wouldn't accept it so readily. Fortunately, she still had her trump card. If you are hesitating because of my compromised status, you need only accept my crown. You don't have to take any responsibility for me. At that moment, the crowd below began to stir, egging him on to accept Miss Nadia's affection. Jaren looked at the crowd below, this bunch of people who loved nothing more than a good spectacle, and felt the weight of public opinion pressing down on him. But the triumphal ceremony had already come this far. He couldn't bring it to ruin with his own hands. Reluctantly, he snatched up the laurel crown, dropped the words "we'll talk about this later," and left without looking back. Watching Jaren's retreating figure, Nadia let out a long, slow breath of relief. In that moment, she finally felt certain she could change the future. That evening, after the royal banquet ended, the Duke couldn't help but praise Nadia for her performance today. Just as they were about to leave, a man called out to them. It was none other than Li Jihao. Over this triumphal ceremony, the Duke had originally promised to have the laurel crown presented to him, but now he had watched helplessly as his own fiancée became engaged to someone else. The Duke could only brush him off with other excuses and promised to find him a better match. Unexpectedly, Li Jihao flew into a rage and demanded the Duke give him an explanation. Being lectured like this by a foreigner, the Duke was clearly furious as well. He sternly rebuked Li Jihao. Things have come to this. What exactly do you want? After dressing down Li Jihao, he then said darkly that he would compensate him, clearly a remark loaded with hidden meaning. With no other choice, Li Jihao had no choice but to agree. As they boarded the carriage, Nadia glanced back for a moment and suddenly froze. She noticed that Li Jihao's expression had turned dark and grim. This was something she had never seen in her previous life. But so what? In my previous life, it was you who betrayed me first. At that moment, the Winter Marquis's household steward came in, reminding Jaren that he needed to come up with a countermeasure quickly, or he'd truly end up being dragged into a marriage. Jaren said with a headache, "It's already too late," and produced a letter from the royal family. In the letter, the king's words were politely phrased, but it was plainly clear he was urging Jaren to marry without delay. If he continued to refuse outright at this point, it would amount to defying a royal command. The steward grew agitated. "Your Majesty has gone too far. After all the great merit earned in this expedition, he treats you like this." And the soldiers, horses, and provisions for the expedition were all paid for with taxes from your own territory. Yet even so, His Majesty still harbors suspicion toward you. Jaren, however, understood clearly that all of this was Duke Bart stirring things up behind the scenes. He wanted to eliminate every possible threat of rebellion. This was because the northern region where Jaren resided had not originally been part of the kingdom. It had only come under the kingdom's rule 100 years ago. The significant cultural differences meant the north and south could not get along well. Though the northern army resisted the invasion of monsters at the border, providing security and prosperity for the south, these nobles still looked down on the people of the north, considering them crude and barbaric. And Jaren's parents had, because of this, fallen victim to someone scheming and died. The one most suspected was none other than Duke Bart. Yet his daughter had gone and presented the laurel crown to the enemy. Jaren understood that her doing so was nothing more than an attempt to disrupt the northern marriage alliances and plant a spy within his camp. At that point, the vice commander reminded Jaren to keep a close eye on Li Jihao, because he had noticed that at the moment Nadia presented the laurel crown, Li Jihao's face had shown a look of great alarm. Hearing the vice commander's account, Jaren became even more certain that the original intended recipient of this laurel crown was Li Jihao. For now, though, he still had to follow His Majesty's wishes. Otherwise, he would be giving others a legitimate reason to attack him. Hearing that their lord was truly going to take Nadia as his wife, the vice commander grew worried. But Jaren looked utterly unconcerned. When all is said and done, she's nothing more than a pampered duke's daughter. Alone and without allies in the north, what could she possibly do? Faced with the cold treatment of the servants, whether she can even last a week is a question. And when she runs back to her family on her own, His Majesty and the Duke can hardly blame it on me. At the engagement ceremony, the man looked at his naively sweet wife-to-be with undisguised disdain. Looking at her innocent and carefree demeanor, Jaren felt nothing but irritation. He asked Nadia what exactly she was scheming. "I'm thinking about you, of course." "Jaren, you look so handsome today." Jaren frowned. "Our relationship isn't close enough for us to be using pet names with each other, so please address me as Marquis Winter." Nadia nodded. "All right, Jaren." Nadia had no intention of indulging him. She was going all in on playing the guileless, insufferable sweetheart. Sure enough, Jaren angrily swatted the girl's hand away. He then turned to leave, not forgetting to warn her viciously. "Just wait until you get to the north. Let's see if you'll still be smiling then." "We'll wait and see." The girl who had been cast aside stood rooted to the spot, listening to the guests whisper and point at her. It seemed he was so ashamed he couldn't even lift his head, listening to the crowd mock him. Yet none of it affected Nadia in the slightest. He finally got that off his chest. "Good riddance, you wretched Marquis." Keeping up the act of a naive, cheerful sweetheart all day was utterly exhausting. After smiling and laughing the whole day, Nadia felt sore all over. So she stepped out onto the balcony to get some fresh air, and it was at that very moment that her former fiancé, Li Jihao, had sought her out. Li Jihao looked somewhat heartbroken. The words he spoke left Nadia completely baffled. "Do you hate the idea of marrying me that much? That you would rather bear the name of someone shallow and lowly by marrying into dying than marry me? Do you despise me that much?" Nadia said she had no idea what he was talking about. "The Duke has already told me everything. It was you who requested a change of marriage partner. Or do you think that I, a man of unknown origins from a foreign land, am unworthy to be your husband?" The girl looked at the man before her who had become a stranger to her, clearly a little angry. "It was obviously you who betrayed me first. Yet now you have the audacity to stand here and hold me accountable. Wasn't it you who never wanted to marry me from the very beginning? Because of your status as a foreigner, you have always been looked down upon. Haven't you always resented that? So you have always wanted to marry a wife of noble standing, not someone like me, a mere lady of modest birth. If it were Karen in my place, marrying you, would you have agreed without a moment's hesitation? Li Jihao was left speechless by Nadia's words. Looking at the silent man, Nadia became even more certain of what she heard before dying in her previous life. What Karen had told her. Anyway, neither of us is the other's ideal partner. From now on, let's go our separate ways. Nadia went to the courtyard, thinking that no one would bother her here. As a result, her good sister came to cause her trouble again. She immediately pointed at Nadia arrogantly, warning her as the legitimate daughter of the family. Don't always follow behind men's backs. You're completely throwing away the Duke's family's face. You are nothing but a pawn for father. The current Nadia would no longer let this sister bully her. Do you think there's any difference between you and me to father? My marriage with Li Jihao has already fallen through. I suppose you're next, Karen. Hearing this, Karen lunged at Nadia like a madwoman and screamed, I am not like you. I am a duchess's daughter. So you still believe in father even now? To him, daughters are nothing but tools to consolidate his political status. Just then, Nadia noticed the necklace around Karen's neck. It was her mother's only relic. Seeing her sister's burning gaze, Karen actually took the necklace off considerately. Nadia wouldn't think that this sister had suddenly found her conscience. As expected, do you want your mother's relic back? Then kneel down and beg me like a dog. In order to get her mother's relic back, the girl was actually asked to kneel and bark like a dog to her half-sister. If she didn't comply, the necklace would be thrown into the river by her. She even said she had plenty of such cheap goods. It doesn't matter if I throw one away. Unexpectedly, while she wasn't paying attention, Nadia pushed her hard into the river. After swallowing a bellyful of water, Karen just floated up and roared at Nadia like a maniac. What are you doing? I will never let you go in this lifetime. Nadia stood on the bank, looking down at the sister who had always bullied her, and said indifferently, what can you do? Anyway, even if I begged you, you wouldn't return the necklace to me. It's more practical to just snatch it, because in her previous life, she obediently knelt down according to her sister's demands. But in the end, she still lost her mother's relic forever. So after being reborn, she figured it out, even if she was obedient, that her sister wouldn't treat her as family. Besides, your hatred for me is completely unreasonable. So I plan to create some reasons for you to hate me. Karen looked at this sister who now felt like a stranger to her, and felt a chill down her spine. Just then, the guests heard the sound of someone falling into the water and rushed over. As soon as Karen was fished out, an angry scolding came from the crowd. What are you two making a scene for in the middle of the night? The Duke watched his daughter making a fool of herself in front of everyone, feeling he was losing face. Unexpectedly, seeing her father, Karen immediately threw herself at him, trembling and pointing at Nadia. It was this lowly, wretched girl who pushed me into the river. Unexpectedly, Nadia said with tearful eyes, I told you the riverbank was dangerous. You're just saying that because you're worried others will call you a wild girl, right? But telling such a lie will disgrace the Duke's family. That little expression was the picture of grievance. Hearing this, Karen instantly flew into a rage. The one lying is obviously you wretched girl. You pushed me into the river because I threatened you with your mother's relic. Hearing the murmurs of the crowd, the not-so-smart Karen finally realized she had misspoken. Now, the gossip-loving crowd was even more fiercely discussing this drama of the vicious legitimate daughter and the pitiful illegitimate daughter. Seeing that the situation couldn't be allowed to escalate further, the Duke hurriedly sent Karen away, telling her to go back and change clothes. Karen, who still hadn't grasped the situation, grabbed her father's hand and wanted to explain, but was rebuked by the Duke with a single sentence. He then bowed and apologized to the guests, preventing the matter from blowing up. The crowd of onlookers, still wanting more drama, slowly dispersed. Seeing the farce end, Nadia stretched her neck. Having been her father's daughter for over a decade, how could Karen not know that what he valued most was his reputation? Anyway, her mother's relic was retrieved. Now she could leave this place with peace of mind and go with that stinky marquis to the north. The next morning, the grand procession set off back to the north. Jaren was thoroughly annoyed by his chatterbox subordinate along the way. He told him to quickly get back to his post. Fabian said that after asking one last question, he would go back. What if the future madam really likes you? Jaren was quite angered by this gossipy subordinate. He fiercely told him, if you keep gossiping like this, you can walk back to the territory on foot. How could such a threat shake a gossipy heart? He pressed on, saying that the future madam's performance at the triumphal ceremony didn't look like acting at all. Jaren earnestly reminded Fabian, absolutely do not be deceived by that woman's appearance. She is a daughter of the Duke Bart family. Who knows when she might stab us in the back? As her guard, you need to keep an extra eye out. He then urged him to go back. Just as Fabian returned, Nadia popped out of the carriage, saying the journey was too boring, so she had been waiting for him. This startled Fabian, who hastily explained that he had just left for a moment due to some matters. So that's how it is. I heard you on my temporary guard. What is your name? Fabian scratched his head in embarrassment and told Nadia his name. Seeing his restrained manner, Nadia asked, "Does my identity make you uncomfortable?" I can understand. After all, the enmity between our two families is known to everyone. But my love for the Marquis is genuine. At this moment, Jaren's recent words suddenly echoed in Fabian's ears. But looking at Nadia's delicate and moving appearance, those words instantly blurred. He hurriedly stated that he was just too shy around strangers. The two chatted lively along the way, and he even introduced a lot of the North situation to Nadia. Days later, the main force finally returned to the Winter family's northern territory. At the wedding ceremony, the bride's mind was completely filled with thoughts of consummating the marriage. So much so that she forgot there was a kissing segment. She originally thought Jaren would just put on an act. Unexpectedly, he actually kissed her. Now she was doomed. She didn't expect the stinky Marquis to be serious. Then wouldn't that first night also have to be spent together? When night came, Nadia paced back and forth anxiously in the room. During the day, Jaren had just taken her first kiss. Now her first night was also at stake. The mere thought of this made Nadia's heart race uncontrollably. Just then, Jaren opened the door and walked in. Nadia could only force a smile and had to put on an expectant expression. Fortunately, the other party told her not to get it wrong. It is absolutely impossible for me to have a child with a daughter of the Bart family. After saying this, he left without looking back. Subsequently, sobbing sounds came from the room, but these were all fake tears meant for others to hear. Fake crying is very tiring. After a few minutes, Nadia got up. I really hope the stinky Marquis will always think this way. At this time, Nadia's stomach was growling with hunger, so she looked at the food on the table. This jerky is so delicious. The red wine is also good. Eating and drinking her fill, then lying on the bed. Is there anything more enjoyable than this? The next day, the news of Nadia, that sleeping in an empty room alone, quickly spread throughout the entire residence. The servants were all waiting to see the madam make a fool of herself. However, the servant in charge of the madam's daily life said she just acted like she was heartbroken, drank some wine, and went to sleep by herself without making a huge fuss. Before long, the servant's gossip about the madam reached Jaren. His subordinate suggested whether they should discipline these servants. Jaren, however, chose to turn a blind eye. Presumably, they don't like that person either. He then asked what Nadia was doing, but upon learning that Nadia had spent the whole morning learning about the family's daily life, Jaren frowned. Starting espionage activities so soon? He then officially appointed Fabian to be the madam's guard. As long as Nadia showed any abnormal behavior or contacted her maiden family, he was to report it to him. After receiving the appointment, Fabian immediately trotted over to report to Nadia. Seeing the madam pause for a moment, Fabian thought she had figured out he was sent by the Marquis to spy on her. Unexpectedly, the next second, Nadia's eyes lit up, and she exclaimed how much Jaren cared about her, feeling extremely happy. Seeing the madam so happy, Fabian, standing aside, thought about how he was here to spy on her and his conscience. That ached slightly. He hurriedly said he would go guard the door. Nadia asked the steward to bring the territory's ledger. After reading it, Nadia was completely dumbfounded. Why is there so much debt? The steward hurriedly explained that because the northern land was barren and tourism wasn't developed, the natural income was low. Although there were state subsidies, the expenses for this expedition were entirely borne by the territory itself, which was why they couldn't make ends meet. Nadia understood. This expedition was forced upon the Marquis by her father. Although she had already formulated a money-making plan before coming, she didn't expect the Marquis's family to be in so much debt. At her wit's end, the steward proposed the idea of using her dowry to offset the debt. Nadia instantly understood. So the reason they handed over the family seal and warehouse keys to her so easily was because they were eyeing her dowry. But Nadia flatly refused, because she discovered from the ledger that the North accumulated some debt every year. Even if she paid off the debt with her dowry, it would only be a temporary fix. Therefore, to solve it fundamentally, this territory needed to be completely transformed. Soon, Fabian relayed the madam's opinion to Jaren. She planned to first use her dowry to make a huge profit. Everyone thought this was just an excuse, and that she simply didn't want to spend a single coin. Just then, the creditors, hearing that the madam had brought a massive dowry, flocked to the door to collect their debts. If the Marquis family didn't pay up, they would seize the Fumong Plains used as collateral. This gave Nadia a huge fright. The Fumong Plains was a rare fertile land in the north. If it was taken away, it would be adding insult to injury for the North. Thinking of this, Nadia wished she could faint. Moreover, there were only 3 months left until the repayment date. Even if the North possessed the strongest army, it was useless without economic support. This way, her revenge plan would also not be impossible to execute. But she already had an idea in mind and requested the creditors to grant a 2-month extension on the repayment period. The creditors were also somewhat puzzled. Since the madam's dowry was enough to repay the debt, why ask for an extension? Because that is my capital for doing business. Wasn't the Winter family in a mutually beneficial, symbiotic relationship with the Northern merchants? So she hoped to use the Winter family's connections to get them to help her out more. Most of the creditors, out of respect for the Winter family's connections, agreed to Nadia's request one after another. But the fat man leading them used an excuse to reject Nadia. He thought that a spoiled young lady like Nadia couldn't possibly know how to do business. While these fools were extending the repayment period, he would have the chance to take away the best piece of land. After everyone left, Nadia instructed the steward to invite all the merchants who had just agreed to extend the repayment, not to the residents, because only those who mutually trusted each other were qualified to know what benefits trusting the Winter family would bring. Seriously, Stinky Marquis, how could you owe so much money? Fortunately, you married a smart and capable wife. From now on, just leave the family's financial power to me. That afternoon, Nadia invited all the merchants on good terms with the family to the residence and stated that she wanted to use thorn herb to start a herbal tea business. Hearing this, the merchants showed troubled expressions because herbal tea was a commoner's drink and couldn't possibly bring in much profit. Nadia, however, insisted on doing this business and asked the merchants to buy up all the herbs on the market. She was even willing to use her dowry to pay the expenses. Hearing this, the merchants turned to look at the steward. This won't do. You should persuade the madam. However, looking at the steward's appearance, it seemed he had already given up struggling. Seeing the merchants still hesitating, Nadia seriously told everyone, I didn't ask you to come this time to discuss this matter, but to hire you to help me purchase, and I will pay a handsome commission. They exchanged glances and reluctantly agreed to Nadia's request. What they didn't know was that herbal tea was just a front. Nadia's true purpose was to buy up all the herbs on the market. 2 months later, Jaren was worrying about the approaching repayment deadline. The steward hurriedly found him, excitedly stating that they were saved. Thanks to the madam's foresight, the Winter family had struck it rich, because right now various territories that were being ravaged by a terrifying virus. People who caught this disease would turn dark purple all over. People called it the Black Death. In just 2 months, a massive number of commoners died from the virus. Corpses were burned every day. At this time, in a village, a young man excitedly spread the news. A potion that could cure the Black Death had been discovered. It was the thorn herb, although merchants from all over rushed to buy it after getting the news that all the herbs on the market were in Nadia's hands. She first distributed it to the residents of her own territory, not selling it at normal prices. In the past, when such disasters occurred, the profiteers controlling the medicine would undoubtedly jack up the prices. Ordinary commoners could only wait for death. So now, the residents of the North were all deeply grateful to her. As for the wealthy southern territories, that she sold it at extremely high prices. This also made the merchants worry, fearing that the southern lords would falsely accuse them of intentionally spreading the virus. Nadia told them not to worry, because at the time, she was the one who insisted on buying the herbs, and she was the daughter of the southern Duke Bart's family. Thanks to the booming herb business, Nadia made a killing. The Winter family's debts were also fully repaid. Jaren watched the creditors leave one after another. From behind came Nadia's voice. Now you should believe me, right? I said I would use my dowry to make money and solve the debt. That was all. That's sincere. Jaren, however, suspiciously asked her how she knew in advance that such a thing would happen. Nadia, that couldn't possibly say she was reborn. She could only use the excuse that she had seen a report in her father's office about the Black Death appearing in a certain territory, so she guessed the disease would soon spread nationwide. Even so, how did you know that the thorn herb could cure it? Because the maid who took care of me when I was a child was a Romani. The Black Death once appeared in their place too, and they eventually found that the thorn herb could cure it. Jaren believed Nadia's words, and he apologized for his previous cold attitude towards her. At first, when you said you would make money, I subconsciously thought you were lying. As the daughter of Duke Bart, why on earth would you do things that benefit me? I say, Stinky Marquis, now what have you been taking my words for all this time? I did all this for you because I love you. Don't you remember the words I said? Seeing Nadia put on this fatal expression again, Jaren, with a headache, said she could make any request. Hearing this, Nadia really wanted to tell him not to nag and interfere with her in the future. As long as he obediently listened, Big Sister would guarantee him a life of luxury and endless wealth. But she couldn't say that, so Stinky Marquis just hugged me once. Hearing Nadia's request, Jaren froze for a few seconds. He thought Nadia would ask him to punish those servants who had been gossiping about her behind her back, or ask him to return the money to her later. Nadia shook her head because she knew clearly that if she made these requests, that she would never truly become a member of the Winter family. Before Jaren could recover from her words, Nadia threw her arms around him. Jaren naturally hugged the girl in his arms tightly. The faint fragrance on her body made Jaren fall deeply for her. 3 months after their engagement, the couple finally had their first intimate contact. Unfortunately, a knock on the door interrupted the two. The steward reminded Nadia that it was time for the business meeting. Nadia took the opportunity to escape the stinky Marquis's embrace. At the business meeting, the merchants marveled that the accounting method taught by Nadia was that's simply too useful. Nadia, however, humbly waved her hand, saying that these were all taught to her by a friend. This person was Li Jihao. As a transmigrator, he not only taught Nadia a lot of advanced knowledge, but most importantly, he instilled in Nadia the concepts of gender equality. And he suggested that Nadia apply this knowledge to the work she truly liked to showcase her abilities. Although Li Jihao ultimately abandoned her, she had to admit that after her rebirth, when Nadia was formulating her revenge plan, this knowledge provided her with significant help. Meanwhile, at the Duke's mansion, Duke Bart flew into a rage because Nadia had solved the North's debt crisis. He had clearly instructed Nadia that her dowry must be used on a business that couldn't possibly make a profit. Herbal tea itself was indeed not impossible to make money from. Unexpectedly, the spread of the Black Death allowed her to make a huge fortune from it. However, this should just be an accident, and it only temporarily alleviated the North's economic crisis. Because he was confident he could plunge the Winter family's financial issues back to rock bottom. But the current Winter family residence, that was renovated from the inside out by the wealthy Nadia. The steward looked at the place where he had spent his whole life, seeing it restored so magnificently one day, and shed tears of excitement. Seeing everyone's happy faces, Nadia also showed a satisfied smile, because this was also a validation of her work. Subsequently, Nadia took out a bag of gold coins and asked the steward to distribute it too. All the servants. Because of the North's perennial poverty, the servants could only receive meager wages. This time, having finally made some money, Nadia also wanted to establish her prestige in the household. Hearing this, the steward flopped down on his knees, deeply moved, and stated he would serve the madam well for the rest of his life. Just then, Nadia noticed outside the window a herald carrying a red flag. Rushing back to the territory, Fabian told her that a red flag, usually, that meant an emergency had occurred. So that's how it is. But Fabian, since it's an emergency, you don't seem nervous at all. Fabian rubbed his head and said, an emergency happening at this time is most likely Count Artai launching a territorial war. Count Artai's territory was situated between the north and the south, belonging to a lawless zone. Nadia stared closely at the whispering duo. Seeing their calm expressions, she guessed that territorial. Wars like this probably happened every year. I really regret marrying here. It's cold, poor, and lacks resources. Not only do we have to defend against beast hordes, but even the neighbor is a madman. Nadia found Jaren. Obviously, he already knew about the territorial war. He stated lightly that such things happen often and he would be back shortly. Her husband was going to the battlefield. How could this not make her worry? Fabian told the madam not to worry. The Winter family's army was the strongest in the entire kingdom, and the strongest among them is our lord. Those garbage Artans are no match for us at all. After hearing Fabian's flattery, Jaren told him to shut up immediately. But at least it gave Nadia a little confidence. Since the Winter family always wins battles, why hasn't the territory increased at all? That's because we can't breach their city. The Artans always, right when they're about to lose, quickly hide inside Barlin City. Barlin City has another nickname called the Iron Turtle. It is a fortress that is easy to defend and hard to attack. As long as they don't come out, we have absolutely no way to deal with them and can only withdraw our troops. Nadia remembered that Barlin City was located on a mountain range rich in iron ore. And not far from it, there was a dragon's lair. Normally, even if a lord discovered a dragon's lair, they wouldn't dare to rush in rashly. But Nadia knew that the owner of that dragon's lair was already dead. This also meant that the countless gold, silver, and treasures inside the dragon's lair had become ownerless. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. She couldn't just stand by and do nothing. At this time, the adjutant found Jaren, reminding him that the army was ready and could set out. Jaren stood up and looked at Nadia. He said he would be right back. Being able to make a territorial war. Sound as easy as a village brawl. I really married an extraordinary man. However, Nadia still looked at Jaren with a worried face. You must stay safe and return peacefully. The adjutant watched the way they parted just now, feeling that the couple's relationship was much better than he had imagined. He also understood. After all, with such a beautiful and delicate woman whispering sweet nothings to you, it would be strange not to be moved. But he still had to remind Jaren not to truly like and trust her. Because she is a daughter of the Bart family. Don't worry, I only owe her a favor, so it's not good to give her the cold shoulder. I haven't truly trusted her. The strongest men in the North Territorial. That war was forcefully turned into a village defense battle by him. But even so, the battle situation still fell into a dilemma because the Artai army retreated back to Barlin City. This is an easy to defend and hard to attack Iron Turtle City. Just as Jaren and the adjutant were discussing whether to retreat, a commotion broke out outside the camp. Jaren went out to check the situation. We saw the person who came. He paused. It was actually his wife, Nadia. Nadia slowly took off her cloak. Long time no see. Jaren, I missed you. Why are you here? This is a military camp. Besides, didn't we just part ways this morning? Nadia didn't care about any of that. It's so good to see you safe and sound. A helpless Jaren could only let her enter the camp first. Nadia leisurely took a sip of red wine. She came here by signing a military pledge. This gave Jaren a fright because I thought of a way to capture Barlin City, but I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, so I had to resort to this bad plan. Jaren, with a headache, asked Nadia, do you understand what a military pledge that means to the army? During wartime, those who confuse our army with lies must apologize with death. I know this very well. Just as Jaren was about to say something, the adjutant interrupted him and signaled Nadia not to speak her mind, because he also wanted to know what kind of idea this spy from the Bart family would give them. Nadia confidently came to the map. She pointed out that they should first use the main force to feign an attack on the west gate, and then use a small unit to dig a tunnel in the north. When the tunnel is dug below the castle, they would place gunpowder and oil inside for a blast. This way, with the collapse of the tunnel, the city wall will also collapse. This way, the Artai people will become sitting ducks. Jaren, however, stated that they had also thought of this method before, but there's a lot of granite beneath Barlin City. Soldiers simply cannot excavate this tunnel. At this time, Nadia said that this is not a problem at all, because she had previously seen Barlin City's weakness in her father's office. The underground on the north side is fragile rock. Jaren thought of how the Artai people had been harassing them since their ancestors' generation. If what Nadia said was true, it could indeed permanently solve this problem. The adjutant also stated that if the information came from the Duke, it indeed had a high degree of credibility. But isn't Madame also a member of the Bart family? Why would she help her family's enemy like this? Jaren interrupted the adjutant, stating that this was a scheme proposed with Nadia's life as a guarantee, so he chose to believe his wife. As expected, only hubby believes me. Jaren is the best. What did she just call me? Hubby? But what I meant was, before Jaren could finish, Nadia grabbed his hand. Just like I urged before, you must stay safe. The next day, the adjutant stared in astonishment at the distance. The wall that had troubled them for generations collapsed. The moment the city wall collapsed, it meant someone was going to be unlucky. Didn't I say I surrender? Count Artai trembled like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Marquis Winter, do you have no noble demeanor? You have to abide by the noble law. Jaren had a look of anger. Now you mention noble law to me? The Winter Army returned from their expedition less than half a year ago. Did you give these soldiers who fought to the death on the battlefield time to catch their breath? You launching a war without authorization is your so-called noble demeanor? Just as Jaren was about to strike Marquis Artai, Nadia stopped him. Since the territorial war is over, we naturally cannot take the Lord's life anymore. However, Nadia's next words left Count Artai. Got instantly dumbfounded. Count Artai committed suicide out of shame for becoming a prisoner of war, leaving behind the last words that all this. That was for the sake of noble demeanor. How about this outcome? This woman is actually even. That worse than Jaren. If this continues, I might really die. So he immediately knelt down and admitted his mistake, promising that as long as his life was spared, that he was willing to give up all his wealth. Seeing her goal achieved, Nadia tossed out a contract she had prepared long ago. Not only would he have to pay a massive amount of compensation, but that he would also cede large areas of land, including Barlin City. The helpless Marquis Artai looked at this formidable couple. What are you still standing there for? Hurry up and sign. The girl merely sprained her ankle and was immediately caught by the man. Although we are already married, aren't you a bit too close to me? Due to the victory in the territorial war, the Winter Army at this time, that was celebrating. Jaren looked at the cheering crowd, thinking about how Nadia not only helped him solve the debt crisis, but even helped him win the territorial war. Initially, he had only seen Nadia as a spy from a hostile family. Feeling guilty, he wanted to apologize to his wife face to face. In her room, Nadia was worrying about how to naturally tell Jaren about the dragon's lair. Should she say that she discovered it by chance while passing by, or that an ancestor told her in a dream at night? Just then, a knock on the door sounded. The visitor was none other than Jaren. He stated that Nadia was the great contributor this time, and asked if she should show her face in front of the soldiers. He then extended his hand to escort Nadia over. This took Nadia by surprise. Why is this man so proactive today? Has the iron tree blossomed? In the corridor, Jaren asked if Nadia wasn't resting. I originally wanted to rest, but thinking about the newly acquired territory, I couldn't sleep. I have to think carefully about how to use it. Nadia was still envisioning her future plans when her foot suddenly sprained. Jaren smoothly caught his wife in his arms. Nadia hurriedly explained that seeing Jaren return safely, that she felt relieved for a moment and became careless. Jaren didn't listen to Nadia's explanation and leaned in for a kiss. Nadia nervously told Jaren to let her go. Afterwards, the Marquis actually obediently released her. At this moment, Nadia's little heart was pounding wildly. Today's Jaren gave her a strange feeling, and the atmosphere between the two was also different from before. As soon as the two entered the banquet hall, they saw a mess. When everyone saw Nadia's arrival, they stood up one after another to greet her. Nadia could only politely respond to the drunken crowd one by one. The reason she that hadn't come to attend was because she was afraid of encountering the situation. Jaren looked at the awkward Nadia and hurriedly explained to her, hoping she would be understanding. Just then, Adjutant Giska came in front of the two. With a thud, he knelt down before Nadia and stated that he had been insubordinate before, actually suspecting the madam of harboring malicious intentions. Nadia looked at Adjutant Giska in surprise. She truly hadn't expected this situation. She understood Adjutant Giska's distrust of her. After all, she was Duke Bart's daughter. But as the Marquis's wife, my face is the Marquis's face. This behavior of yours is equivalent to smearing dirt on your own lord's face. Just as Jaren wanted to excuse Adjutant Giska, Nadia actually interrupted Jaren at once. With a serious face, she stated that as the Marquis's wife, she needed to establish her authority. So she had to punish him according to his crime. Moreover, my punishment should be very difficult for you to bear alone. But if everyone shares it together, it should be a little lighter. The onlookers eating melons nearby were instantly dumbfounded. Unexpectedly, Nadia changed her serious expression. I'll punish all of you. Got to take a penalty drink from me. Not a single person is allowed to run away. Everyone then came back to their senses. They had been fooled by the madam. They didn't expect the madam to have such a mischievous side. But seeing the wash basins being brought up one by one, the crowd could no longer laugh. The madam's seemingly nonsensical punishment not only rebuked their unreasonableness, but also didn't make everyone lose their good impression of her. It even made everyone remember her identity as the mistress. It seemed the madam was no ordinary person. Perhaps the North really had welcomed a noble savior. Looking at Nadia, that who is now mingling with everyone, that Sundara Jaren actually revealed a smile. At this moment, Nadia truly became a member of the Winter family. Late at night, the woman sneaked into the storehouse, but not to steal anything. She was seen slipping a letter into a stack of documents. Her face also revealed an expression of a successful scheme. Stinky Marquis, I've worried my heart out for this family. The next day, Nadia, feigning shock, dug out the letter she had prepared yesterday, stating that someone had discovered a dragon's lair nearby. Hearing this, Jaren helplessly stated that the hard-won territory wouldn't be abandoned just because of a dragon's lair. But you probably don't need to worry. It says here that the owner of the dragon's lair seems to have died a long time ago. Nadia's words made Jaren pause involuntarily, and judging by the date on the letter, Count Artai hasn't started excavating yet. That means the gold, silver, and treasures in the dragon's lair are all ours. Jaren couldn't help but wonder why all the good things recently were happening to him. Of course, as long as you obediently listen to your big sister, your blessings are yet to come. However, Jaren still noticed an anomaly. The handwriting on this letter was crooked like crawling earthworms. How could his wife recognize it? Nadia suddenly remembered that to prevent Jaren from recognizing her handwriting, she deliberately wrote it with her left hand. She figured no one but herself could read it. She quickly explained that her father's handwriting was bad, and she got used to it since childhood, so she could read it. She then urged Jaren to send an exploration team to confirm it. Jaren felt this explanation was too fake, but he didn't delve into it. He turned his head and ordered his subordinates to send an exploration team to confirm the dragon's lair. Afterward, Jaren led everyone to inspect this newly acquired territory, unable to help but sigh. Such fertile land actually belonged to him now, but his subordinates reminded him that although this land was very fertile, due to a labor shortage, most of the farmland had been left idle for several years. The previous Marquis Artai rented the land to farmers and exacted exorbitant taxes from them, which led the farmers to flee one after another. Jaren looked at the vast land. Even if he moved the Winter families, farmers over, there would definitely still be a shortage of manpower. At this time, Adjutant Giska proposed capturing the residents who had previously fled and bringing them back. Nadia opposed this suggestion. After all, such heavy-handed methods would affect the Marquis family's reputation. She proposed that they could take in nomads to come and farm. but those nomads would likely be unwilling to settle here. Even if they publicly announced a reduction in taxes, Marquis Artai had already ruined the territory's reputation. Jaren looked at Nadia's confident expression. Could it be that she had thought of another solution? So he opened his mouth to ask his wife, "Madam, do you have any good ideas?" Nadia looked at him in surprise. What was this situation? The cold man had changed his nature. He actually took the initiative to ask for someone else's opinion. So she smiled and said, "If you can lend me your sword for a few days, I should be able to solve this problem." The origin of this sword was no small matter. It was the Lord's sword passed down from generation to generation by the head of the Winter family. However, since this request was made by his wife, Jaren still obediently took off his sword and handed it to Fabian behind him. This sword is very heavy. You won't be able to lift it with your thin arms and legs. So if you need anything, just instruct Fabian. Nadia hurriedly retorted, "I'm not as weak as you think. But last time, I felt you were much lighter than I imagined." Nadia immediately thought of the time she sprained her ankle and Jaren held her. This Thunder guy really had become different. A few days later, the story of Peter and the 10 gold bars spread throughout the entire kingdom. One day, a new lord arrived in the Artai territory and hung a notice at the city gate. As long as someone could pull out the Lord's sword, that they would be rewarded with 10 gold bars. Although everyone wanted to get the gold bars, no one dared to pull it, because everyone thought this was a test from the newly arrived lord for everyone. Until one day, a boy named Peter volunteered to pull out the Lord's sword. Unexpectedly, he pulled out the sword very easily. After hearing the news that Peter had pulled out the sword, that the Lord's adjutant found him, the residents also began to worry for Peter. Unexpectedly, the Lord actually kept his promise and really rewarded Peter with 10 gold bars. After getting the gold bars, Peter lived a happy life ever after. Hearing this story, the nomads flocked to Barlin City one after another. At this time, Barlin City, due to the influx of a large number of people and the newly taken over territorial affairs, kept Nadia overwhelmingly busy. Jaren looked at his wife and sighed that she seemed more suited to be the lord than he was. But why was she so dedicated to the Winter family's affairs? Although she always says it's because she loves me, she cares too little about me, right? Just then, Fabian barged in abruptly. He happily announced that he had found the blueprints for Barlin City. Barlin City truly lived up to being the most solid fortress in the kingdom. Even the inside of the city was like a maze. Regarding this, Jaren stated that the previous city lord was a person who liked to take preventive measures. Designing it this way must have been to prevent foreign enemies from invading. Little did they know that the two of them were exactly the foreign enemies Jaren spoke of. Subsequently, the two began their exploration of Barlin City, because there were many secret rooms in the city, that there might be undiscovered treasures. Most importantly, legend had it that there were dwarves hidden in Barlin City. The weapons forged by dwarves were the best in the entire kingdom. For the development of the Winter family's territory, they had to be found. Just as Nadia searched fruitlessly and was about to give up, Jaren discovered something unusual. This was clearly a dead end, but there was a crack on the wall, and there were signs of wear and tear around it. There really was a secret room behind this wall. The group went down the stairs. The bloodstains on the wall startled Nadia. Reaching the bottom of the secret room, a huge blacksmith shop unexpectedly appeared. Swords and armor lining the walls were displayed here like merchandise. Nadia casually picked up a small knife and found that its craftsmanship far exceeded ordinary weapons. Seeing this, Jaren snatched the small knife away and reminded Nadia to be careful as the weapons might be poisoned. Just then, Fabian ran over and said in a panic, that strange sounds were coming from the room next door. The sound sounded like someone was about to die. Jaren told Fabian to go in with him to check the situation and instructed Nadia to step back a bit. Then, he kicked the door open with one foot. A row of prison cells appeared before Jaren's eyes, and from the cells, there were continuous cries for mercy. As expected, those locked up inside were all dwarves. Nadia was shocked by the scene before her. Every single one of them was bound by iron chains. They were clearly exploited by Marquis Artai previously. Fabian was just about to ask what to do next when Jaren stated that he would handle it. He then walked up to the dwarves and raised his sword high. Nadia thought he was going to kill the dwarves. And hugged Jaren from behind. Why do you want to get rid of them? They're also victims exploited by Marquis Artai. Jaren looked at his wife in confusion. Who said I was going to get rid of them? I was going to chop off their shackles and give them freedom. I am a new lord of the Artai territory. Jaren, can you tell me what Marquis Artai did to you before? Initially, we just wanted to see the outside world. We didn't expect that because of our stature, that we would be ostracized by everyone, to the point where no one was even willing to treat my son who was sick with a fever. So I decided to go to the city to ask Lord Artai for help. I originally thought the Lord that would pity us and lend a helping hand. Unexpectedly, after seeing us, he wanted to drive us away without a second word. Just as we were about to be thrown out, a wine goblet in my bag accidentally fell out. When Marquis Artai saw the goblet, he found it to be exceptionally exquisite, so he accused us of stealing the goblet. But upon learning that we made it ourselves, he brought us into this secret room and promised us that as long as we that made things for him, he would help treat my son. After my child recovered, we requested to leave from the Lord. Unexpectedly, after seeing our manufacturing skills, Marquis Artai not only didn't let us go, but also locked us up here. Hearing this, Jaren stated that he would give them financial compensation and provide medical treatment. The dwarf uncle hurriedly thanked him after hearing this and stated that as long as the Lord promised to treat them and let them return to where they originally lived, they would be extremely grateful. Hearing the dwarf uncle's story, Nadia thought of herself in her past life, unwelcome everywhere, giving her all only to receive betrayal in return. So she stepped forward to persuade them. If you just go back like this, what a pity it would be. The world you have seen is only a very small part. Follow me from now on. In the Winter family, I promise to take you to see the broader world outside. I can also guarantee that you will never be kidnapped or imprisoned again. In addition, you'll be paid an ample salary and given holidays, so you can enjoy yourselves in the territory to your heart's content. Seeing his wife so insistent, Jaren also stepped forward and guaranteed them in his capacity as the new lord. Seeing the couple's insistence, the dwarves exchanged opinions and agreed to Nadia's request. With the dwarves' help, Nadia instructed them, and they quickly produced a new type of plate armor. Fabian said excitedly, "This armor simply cannot be pierced by ordinary weapons." Nadia smiled and said, "This armor was just an idea I had before. Now that we have hired the dwarves and discovered iron, or this idea has been realized. The defensive power of this plate armor far exceeded ordinary chainmail. Because this technology was designed by Li Jihao, she merely experienced all this ahead of time. No matter what with this armor, the army's defense could be greatly improved. And it's also for this goal that I've worked so hard until now." Jaren looked at his wife before him. She truly has an unpredictable woman's mind. The girl has to say, "I love you" to her husband every day. Not only is she beautiful and kind-hearted, but she also knows how to make money. She could even help her husband capture territory, because she knew that the civil war between the North and the South would soon break out, and everything she did was to take revenge on her father and sister who killed her in the previous life. Meanwhile, in the royal capital, Duke Bart, upon hearing the news that Jaren had occupied Barlin City, was furious. His subordinate told him that Jaren had successfully captured it through underground explosions. This made Duke Bart wonder how Jaren knew about the secret of Barlin cities terrain. Moreover, ever since Nadia married him, he seemed to have turned on a cheat code. So he asked his subordinate if Nadia had brought any news from the north. Seeing the Duke in a fit of rage, the subordinate hastily reported the good news from Li Jihao's side. Lord Jihao had become a dragon slayer. Although Li Jihao's performance satisfied the Duke, he still planned to write a letter to Nadia to remind her of her identity as a spy. Meanwhile, in the north, the Winter Army returned in triumph after winning the territorial war. The people cheered joyfully upon seeing their lord, because the victory in the war brought a large amount of supplies to the barren northern territory. A little boy in the crowd drooled when he saw the colorful fruits on the carriage. The people here could barely satisfy their basic needs for food and clothing, let alone point fraîche fruits. Seeing this, Nadia stepped down from the carriage, picked up an apple, and walked up to the little boy. She smiled and said that she could only give him one today, but before long, everyone would be able to eat fruits regularly. The little boy looked excitedly at the apple in his hand. This was his first time eating one. Seeing this, Jaren decided to rest in this village for a while and distributed the supplies to the villagers. Nadia found Jaren, originally intending to discuss matters after returning to the city. However, the moment he saw Nadia, oh no, it was the feeling of his heart skipping a beat. He completely didn't listen to what Nadia was discussing with him. He only had one thought in his mind. Why didn't I realize she was so beautiful before? It's over. The iron tree has blossomed. Seeing that Jaren ignored her and just stared blankly at her, Nadia quickly approached and pulled him out of his reverie. Jaren could only use the excuse of not sleeping well last night. Nadia came to discuss with him what position she should take when returning to the city. Jaren said that of course the married couple should lead the way into the city, but Nadia wanted to keep a low profile because she didn't want to attract her father's attention and make him think she was a double agent. Actually, you don't have to go this far. Although Duke Bart and I are political enemies, he is still your father. I won't put you in a difficult position, nor will I drag you into the struggle between us. Hearing this, Nadia hastily retorted that if one day she had to choose between the two sides, she would choose Jaren without hesitation. because she liked Jaren the most. Her love brain was acting up again, but this time it made Jaren blush all the way to the tips of his ears. He turned his head, thinking, are all Southern girls this expressive with their love? This is too bold. Thus, he agreed to Nadia's request and told her to quickly get on the carriage to set off. What's going on? Was he just shy? To think that this aloof and tsundere guy also had such a cute side. Hey Nadia, what about your love brain? And Jaren, you tsundere man, can you two stop playing this you run, I chase you can't escape game? Your home is about to be stolen. Meanwhile, in the Lord's mansion, Jaren's aunt, Madame Gray, found the butler, Gordon, and wanted him to hand over the mistress's seal. Gordon awkwardly stated that the current mistress of the Winter family was Nadia. Madame Gray sneered and asked Gordon, is the mistress you speak of currently in the mansion? Tell me, if the mistress leaves her post without permission, who should be in charge of managing the household? That woman just happened to disappear when Jaren was away. Don't you think it's too much of a coincidence? Maybe she has already run away. Don't forget, she is Duke Bart's daughter. Hearing this, Gordon had no choice but to helplessly tell Madame Gray the news that Nadia was with Jaren. In that case, that woman is even more suspicious. Who knows what scheme she might play on the battlefield? Gordon, however, stated that the Marquis would handle matters on the battlefield himself. Besides, the Marquis was about to return to the city. Madame could go ask him herself. The next second, the victorious Winter Army returned to the Lord's mansion in a grand procession. Everyone, including Madame Gray, went out to welcome them. Seeing her, Jaren asked in surprise why his aunt had come out. Unexpectedly, Madame Gray pointed the spearhead at Nadia. With a worried face, she expressed that she was startled when she heard the news. You were just a woman. How dare you go to such a dangerous place like the battlefield? Nadia saw through Madame Gray's intentions at a glance and turned on her drama queen mode again. Because I missed the Marquis so much, I couldn't sleep well every day. Madame Gray was greatly shocked upon hearing this. Such a perfunctory reason was spoken so calmly, and the key point was that everyone actually believed it. How did she do it? Jaren blushed to the tips of his ears upon hearing this, and hastily coughed a few times to ease the awkwardness. Madame Gray obviously wouldn't be brushed off so easily, so she questioned Nadia. If that's the case, you should be more considerate of Jaren. Have you ever thought that your presence on the extremely dangerous battlefield would hinder him? Unexpectedly, Adjutant Giska stood out. Seeing this, Madame Gray felt a surge of joy, thinking that a loyal subject like Adjutant Giska must also be very dissatisfied with Nadia. However, to her surprise, Adjutant Giska told Madame Gray to watch her words and asked her to be more polite to the madam. Other soldiers also chimed in to speak up for Nadia, and Jaren actually pulled Nadia into his arms, stating, although you are an elder, Nadia is now the mistress of the Winter family. This is the most basic rule. Leaving behind a sentence that they were tired from the long journey and needed rest, he put his arm around Nadia and entered the Lord's mansion. At this moment, Madame Gray was trembling with anger. She couldn't believe that in just a few short months, everyone in the Winter family was actually speaking up for this Southern lady. If this continued, she would completely lose her dominant position. Once that woman held the power of the family and gave birth to an heir, by then, not only her own status, but even her son's position would be shaken. She absolutely could not just sit by and watch. Returning to her room, Nadia threw herself onto the bed, sign that compared to running around on the battlefield, pretending to be a love brain, was clearly more exhausting. But recalling Jaren's performance just now, she didn't expect him to. Support her so strongly in front of the family. Right at this moment, the maid Lisa reminded Nadia that the bathwater was ready. Nadia let Lisa in and took out the gifts she had prepared for them. These were specialty jewelry from Barland City, and she asked her to pass them on to the other two maids who served her. Lisa was deeply moved upon seeing this, thinking of the Marquis's various cold attitudes towards the madam before, and that the two had been sleeping in separate rooms since their marriage. So after discussing it with the other two maids, the three of them prepared to heat up the relationship between the madam and the Marquis. Meanwhile, in the bathroom, Nadia was comfortably taking a rose bath. Suddenly, the sound of the door opening caught Nadia's attention. She thought Lisa had come so quickly to serve her in her bath. However, she was greatly shocked upon seeing the person who entered. She saw Jaren standing in front of her with a bewildered look on his face. What's going on here, right? This young couple's first time meeting each other, so honestly was actually accomplished with the divine assist of the maids. At this moment in the bathroom, Nadia looked at Jaren in surprise, and Jaren, realizing that it was a bit awkward to keep staring at his wife, turned his head and stammered an explanation that the servants reported his private bathroom was under repair, so he came here. Now, Nadia understood everything. It must be that girl Lisa's doing. No wonder she was frantically signaling earlier that she would handle everything tonight. But Jaren looked so cute just now. This is the first time I've seen seen him so flustered. Jaren also seemed to realize it was the maid's doing, saying that he would properly discipline them. He then turned around, preparing to walk out of the bathroom. Nadia also breathed a sigh of relief, seeing him leave. But just as Jaren was about to step out, he thought, did he seem very cold to her? So much so that the maids that would do such a thing? Nadia, who was still bathing, completely didn't notice a man's leg stretching over. With a splash, there was suddenly another person beside Nadia. Before Nadia could speak, Jaren hastily explained that if he went out now, rumors of him being cold to her would spread again later, which would put her in a difficult position. Nadia thought to herself, is this Tsundra guy not considering my feelings? This made Nadia feel that Jaren's consideration for her was quite cute, so she decided to tease him. Nadia took the initiative to approach Jaren and asked him if he wanted to serve each other in the bath like a loving married couple. Hearing this, Jaren immediately blushed, turned his head, and said that they didn't necessarily have to do anything. But Nadia noticed the scars on his body. She reached out, caressed them, and asked when he got them. Jaren was startled by Nadia's actions. Jaren exasperatedly asked why she was always so bold in these kinds of matters. Now he was doomed. If he had known, he should have just gone out earlier. Now he didn't even dare to look straight at her. Nadia saw Jaren's awkwardness, so she suggested they just chat. Thinking of recent events, Jaren prepared to thank Nadia. The Winter Territory was originally an area with limited development. But because of Nadia, not only has the territory become prosperous, but even our military strength has greatly increased. So I'm truly very grateful. Hearing Jaren thank her, Nadia realized this was the first time she had received recognition from the people around her. She didn't expect it to be so fulfilling, so she also wanted to thank Jaren. Jaren asked in surprise what she was thanking him for. Of course, it's to thank you for marrying me. It's over, now that Sunderman is sinking even deeper. The next day, the gossip about the two instantly spread within the maid circle. It was said that the two only came out of the bathroom in the early hours of the morning last night, plus their mental states. The battle situation was clear at a glance. The madam, who had a good sleep after the bath and was glowing with health, and the male master who looked like a withered eggplant. After breakfast, Jaren got up and was about to go inspect the territory. The maid Lisa suddenly jumped out and said that today was the day the grand market opened, and asked if he wanted to take the madam along. Nadia awkwardly stated that she still had a mountain of business waiting for her to handle. Unexpectedly, Jaren actually reached out his hand, and invited Nadia to go together. The two walked in the grand market. Nadia sighed that it was even livelier than she had imagined. Jaren looked back at the guards who were scattered by the crowd. It might be a grand celebration held by the residents after incorporating the new territory into the Winterlands. Right at this moment, Nadia's cloak was squeezed off by the crowded people. The public also noticed the marquis, and the madam. Jaren feared Nadia might be in danger, so he prepared to take her back to the castle. Unexpectedly, danger was also quietly approaching. In the crowd, a person suddenly rushed out, attacking toward Nadia, the married couple's first time inspecting the territory after marriage. Unexpectedly had a person suddenly rush out from the crowd. Carrying a bucket of excrement, cursing running dog of the Bart family, he lunged at Nadia. Nadia was so frightened that she stood frozen in place. In the nick of time, Jaren flashed forward and shielded Nadia behind him. He then subdued the mobster with one move. Seeing it was the Lord, the mobster immediately argued, saying that Nadia was a running dog of the Bart family and that they had a deep blood feud with us. Don't be deceived by her. My brother was killed by the Bart family because it was the Bart family who forced the northern soldiers to charge at the front lines, while the southern noble lords only sat in the back to enjoy the fruits of our labor. Hearing these words, Nadia couldn't help but tremble. The surrounding public also began to whisper among themselves, but they were all on Nadia's side. The contributions she had made to the North during this time had undoubtedly gained the public's recognition. Right at this moment, the man's mother rushed over. She plopped down on her knees before Jaren and begged him to spare her son's life. Ever since his older brother died, he has had mental problems. My son died in battle during the expedition. Of course, his death has nothing to do with the madam. Jaren looked at the pitiful mother in front of him and showed a look of dilemma. Thus, he let go of the man and said that he remembered the soldier who died in battle. He fought on the front lines for the Winter family. He was a true warrior, and his death was very honorable. Hearing her son's heroic deeds, the mother began to cry loudly. Just then, Nadia came to Jaren's side and said she was fine, so they should let this matter go. Jaren looked at her cautious expression, which was like she was begging him. He came before the mother and said, "Since my wife says it's fine, I will not pursue this matter." The mother expressed deep gratitude to Nadia upon hearing this. Looking at this pitiful mother and son, Nadia had mixed feelings in her heart. Her father had done so many bad things to the North. The things she had done were completely unable to wash away these sins. Therefore, Nadia decided to work even harder to change the living conditions of the northern residents. The assistant watched Nadia, who was still working hard even though it was already late at night. He sighed, noting that ever since the madam returned, she seemed to be working even more desperately. The next day, Jaren was at the training ground, recalling yesterday's encounter. During the expedition, it was indeed because Duke Bart made him lead the vanguard, not that they suffered heavy casualties. But Duke Bart's deeds went far beyond these, because he was also the enemy who harmed his parents. But these things were all done by her father. Moreover, Nadia had done so much for the North. Without her, there would be no prosperous winter territory today. But even so, it couldn't erase the fact that she was a member of the Bart family. This was also the point that conflicted Jaren the most. Right at this moment, the soldiers also successively arrived at the training ground. Upon seeing Jaren, the soldiers teased him, saying that he had been inseparable from the madam recently. Perhaps because they were newlyweds, he rarely came to the training ground. But when Jaren turned around, he looked like a withered eggplant. This made the soldiers suspect if the madam was taking good care of him. Thus, they began to quietly gossip about the relationship progress between the Lord and the madam. They also reminded him that no matter how passionate a love is, it will have a day when it cools down. You can't keep being so tsundra like this. Do you think there will be anyone else who truly adores you like the madam in the future? In my opinion, being able to hit the madam's aesthetic sweet spot is the greatest blessing of your life. Jaren, that couldn't stand their teasing and could only speak the truth. He knew that Nadia was a wife that could only be encountered by chance and not actively sought after. But if he fell in love with her, what about his dead mother and his better-than father? This was also the reason why he could never accept Nadia's confession. Right at this moment, Fabian found Jaren and said that the madam wanted to have lunch with him. Jaren recalled that this seemed to be the first time Nadia had invited him. Jaren, you big jerk. How dare you lose your temper with such a cute and beautiful wife? Aren't you afraid she'll just lie flat and not help you make money, making you return to poverty overnight? At noon, Nadia had lunch with Jaren as usual, but the atmosphere was extremely oppressive. Nadia understood in her heart that what happened a few days ago put Jaren in a bad mood. She understood that the territory's residents couldn't fully trust her yet. After all, she had a father like that. So she spoke up, saying he didn't need to be depressed because of her. Jaren, however, stated that he didn't want to talk about this topic anymore. But Nadia knew clearly that this was an obstacle the two of them couldn't bypass. We are husband and wife. Between husband and wife. But if there's a problem, shouldn't we communicate promptly? Unexpectedly, Jaren's face suddenly darkened, and he lost his temper at Nadia, telling her to stop talking. This startled both of them. Are you crazy? How dare you yell at your wife? Jaren instantly realized his mistake and immediately apologized to Nadia. Nadia, however, didn't mind at all and understandingly said they could talk when he felt like it. Jaren looked at Nadia, having words in his heart that were hard to say. Actually, it's not your problem. It's all my fault. I clearly know that your father killed my mother, yet my heart is still wavering for you. After lunch, Fabian caught up with Nadia, who was preparing to return to her room, and told her about the accident that happened to Jaren's parents. Nadia was shocked upon hearing this. She had been in the North for so long, yet Jaren had never told her about his parents. She only knew that Jaren's parents were in a carriage crash, which led to the death of Jaren's mother, and his father was severely injured, and had yet to regain consciousness. And her own father was undoubtedly the biggest suspect in that accident. Fabian told Nadia that the Lord was currently very troubled. He also didn't know whether he should fall in love with his enemy's daughter. And the incident in the village was just the fuse. So none of this was the madam's fault. It turned out Jaren had been troubled by this matter all along. Although her father had done many wicked things, that she knew that the murder of Jaren's parents was truly not done by her father, because she had heard her father personally say at the time that he disdained such a clumsy scheme. If he were to do it, he would not leave any survivors. Moreover, Jaren's methods were much stronger than his father's. If his father died, Jaren would succeed him. Under his management, the Winter family would become even stronger. Why would he want to bring this time forward? Besides, she heard that the previous Marquis's body was slowly becoming stiff. This didn't seem like the sequelae of an accident at all. The mastermind behind this matter must be within the Winter family, and that must be someone who could freely enter and exit Jaren's father's bedroom. Now, only she knew the truth, so she had to find the murderer. But if she said it herself, it would completely lack persuasiveness. Just then, a maid brought a letter. A family letter from Duke Bart's mansion. Hearing that it was actually a letter from her father, Nadia, nervously opened it. The contents all reflected a father's longing for his daughter. But only Nadia knew the hidden meaning within. Every sentence contained her father's threat to her, a fake spy. The maid asked Nadia if she needed a pen to write a reply. Nadia hastily said no. She knew deeply that she could no longer just sit and wait for death like this. At night, a subordinate reported to Madame Gray about the conflict that happened to the young couple during the day. She immediately mocked. The little girl is still too green. Even if she totally captivated Jaren before, as soon as it involved his parents, it will trigger the seed of hatred in his heart. No matter how much that little girl can stir things up, she is just a little brat who has been in the Winter family for less than a year. She has no idea that the entire Winter family is full of my informants. She then wrote a secret letter and instructed her subordinate to pass it on to them, adding, "Don't forget to burn it after confirmation." I mean, can you two be a bit more reserved? Didn't you just finish arguing in the morning? Why are you sticking together again so soon? In the afternoon, Nadia came to the shooting range and met Jaren, who was practicing archery. The married couple. That arguing is inevitable, but one side always has to make a concession. So she prepared to break this awkward atmosphere. She came to Jaren's side and asked if he could teach her archery. Jaren, however, asked in confusion, "You're a girl, and you want to learn this?" "Can I? You idiot. Can't you see I'm making a friendly gesture towards you?" Unexpectedly, Jaren didn't say anything and just turned and left. Seeing this situation, Nadia's disappointed expression was beyond words. Unexpectedly, after a short while, Jaren brought a beginner's bow, an arrow, and walk back. But even with a beginner's bow, Nadia had to use all her strength to barely pull it. Seeing this, Jaren stepped forward and supported Nadia, ready to teach her hand in hand. "If you're gonna teach, just teach. Why are you getting so close?" Who would have thought that a guy with thick eyebrows and big eyes like Jaren could be such a flirt? At this moment, Nadia was extremely nervous. She only came to ease their relationship, not expecting to get herself involved in this. So she let go. The arrow accurately hit the ground below the target. Unexpectedly, Jaren seriously stated that he would arrange another time to help her practice. After this incident, Jaren also understood Nadia's intentions, so he prepared to apologize to her for what happened in the morning. Unexpectedly, Nadia nervously stated that she didn't mind it at all anymore. But even so, Jaren still blushed and said, "Thank you for coming to find me." At night, a maid sneaked into the garden. After confirming there was no one else around, she found the sewing tool she had left behind. Then, all alone under the dim moonlight, she started sewing clothes. Just then, the guard on patrol discovered her. At the same time, he also found the sewing tool she hid behind her back. He immediately understood that Aiden was doing private work, but that as Nadia's personal maid, doing private work was forbidden. So he grabbed her and went to find Madame Gray. Upon seeing Madame Gray, Aiden trembled with fear. The guard described the course of events to Madame Gray. Upon hearing that she would be kicked out of the Marquis's mansion, Aiden immediately begged Madame Gray for mercy and stated that she was doing private work just to earn some extra income to cover her younger brother's medical expenses. Listening to Aiden's explanation and realizing she was Nadia's personal maid, a vicious idea immediately came to Madame Gray's mind. So she squatted down and helped Aiden up, even blaming Nadia for not being considerate of her servants at all. She took a bag of gold coins from her pocket and gave them to her to treat her brother. The next day, Madame Gray unexpectedly went to find Nadia on her own initiative. She expressed her sympathy, saying Nadia was working too hard, starting to handle official business right after eating. Nadia, however, stated that she was preparing to write a reply to her father. Although full of doubts in her heart, Nadia still warmly invited Madame Gray to take a seat. As soon as she sat down, Madame Gray put on an act, apologizing to Nadia with an embarrassed face. She said it was this old woman who was too foolish, always treating her as a spy of the Bart family, but only woke up to the truth after seeing her contributions to the Winter family. She even squeezed out a few tears. Unexpectedly, Nadia was deeply moved after hearing this, and stated that Jaren's aunt is her aunt, and told her not to be so formal with her in the future. To think someone dared to put on an act in front of Nadia. Isn't this like showing off one's proficiency with an axe before Luban, or selling nutcakes at the entrance of bank? Madame Gray was left completely bewildered, so she immediately changed the subject and asked if Nadia had met the former Marquis, because as the former Marquis's health continued to deteriorate, it would be best to visit him before any bad news arrived. Nadia thought about how, when she first arrived at the Marquis's mansion, the family's resistance towards her meant she had no chance to visit him. But as everyone's trust increased, she promised to visit him when she had time. Seeing her goal achieved, Madame Gray got up and prepared to leave. Nadia exchanged some pleasantries and asked Aiden to see Madame Gray out. Nadia smiled as she watched Madame Gray leave. The drama of two women with 100 hidden agendas came to an end, but Nadia knew in her heart that the real show had just begun. At this moment, Nadia was worrying about one thing. Although Madame Gray's visit was clearly ill-intentioned, she learned from her that the former Marquis's days were numbered. She had been married into the Marquis's mansion for half a year, yet she had never met her father-in-law. She was truly an unqualified daughter-in-law. Moreover, she had a vague feeling that this matter was not as simple as it seemed on the surface. Perhaps she could take this opportunity to find the culprit who harmed the former Marquis. Unexpectedly, Lisa also reminded Nadia to be careful of Madame Gray. She felt that Madame Gray's attitude changed too quickly, and there must be a conspiracy. To think even you noticed it. Don't worry. I won't be deceived by her appearances. Just then, Nadia noticed Madame Gray outside the window, with Aiden. Seeing this, Lisa also felt it was unfair. As Madame's personal maid, why was Aiden getting so close to Madame Gray? Dia, however, didn't say a word, just sipped her tea thoughtfully. In the afternoon, accompanied by the butler Gordon, Nadia came to the former Marquis's room. Nadia was deeply shocked by the scene before her. She didn't expect her father-in-law to become so emaciated. Rumor had it that the former Marquis, like Jaren, was a truly indomitable man. Although the comatose former Marquis couldn't hear a thing, Gordon still talked about what had happened over the past few months. Looking at this master and servant, Nadia felt extremely sad. And Jaren came to pay his respects every day. How heartbroken he must be each time. Although she had used deception, to become the mistress of the Winter family, she would definitely do her utmost to make the Winter family the most powerful and prosperous territory in the country. Before leaving here, after the visit ended, the butler Gordon didn't forget to lock the heavy doors. The security work here was done very thoroughly. Even the windows were sealed. Therefore, the only person who could harm the former Marquis under these conditions was that person. At this moment, Nadia knew in her heart that her plan to find the mastermind behind the scenes was already half complete. Just then, Jaren, who was preparing to visit his father, happened to run into them. Upon seeing Nadia, Jaren asked in surprise why she had come. As a member of the Winter family, isn't visiting the former Marquis what I should? Do? From now on, I will come with you to visit him, okay? Every time, Jaren faced his increasingly emaciated father alone. If she accompanied him, he should feel a little better, right? Jaren didn't expect Nadia to make this request, but he agreed without a second thought. At this moment, Nadia suddenly thought of something, so she approached Jaren and asked him if he could spare some time after the visit, because she was preparing to lay her secret plan completely bare to Jaren. When night came, even though it was already very late, Nadia was still handling official business. The maid beside her felt it was unfair for Nadia to work so hard. It's one thing that the Lord Marquis hasn't confessed to Madame, but he actually lost his temper with her the day before yesterday. Aiden suddenly thought of an idea. Madam, have you heard the legend of the 1,000-year-old tree? There is a towering tree near the North City Gate that has lived for thousands of years. Legend has it that angels live in the tree. As long as that you pray for the angel's blessing under the tree on the day it blooms, you can become lovers with the person you deeply love. The other maids also chimed in to encourage her. I think you guys just want to sneak out and slack off. However, she still agreed to take them to the tree to pray for blessings 3 days later. On the morning 3 days later, Aiden, who usually loved to sleep in, got up early. When she went out, a bag of gold coins accidentally fell from her pocket. Lisa, who was nearby, abruptly got up and asked Aiden where she got so much money. Aiden, however, didn't answer. She ran out of the room without looking back. Lisa immediately sensed that this matter was not simple. In her heart, she hesitated whether to tell Madame. To truly love someone is to wish for the happiness of the one you love, even if you won't be together. In the evening, Nadia arrived at the 1,000-year-old tree, accompanied by the maids. Looking at the two incredibly excited people, Nadia couldn't understand their mood. Not at the moment. But the moment she saw the 1,000-year-old tree, Nadia was deeply shocked by the beautiful scenery before her. Lisa encouraged Nadia from the side to quickly make a wish, saying the angel of love would definitely descend upon Madame and the Marquis. At this moment, Nadia subconsciously thought, if only Jaren were here with me. But why did she think of Jaren in the first place? She didn't know since when her feelings for Jaren had changed. Beside her, Lisa had already started praying for the relationship between Nadia and Jaren. Looking at Lisa, Nadia couldn't help but feel guilty. Everyone in the Marquis' mansion unconditionally thought of her well-being, but in the end, she would still leave this place. And all she could do was pray for Jaren's love, hoping that he would one day find the love of his life here and live happily with this new mistress. Although that guy was very wooden and not good at expressing his feelings, he was actually a very gentle person. But for some reason, at the thought of Jaren falling in love with another woman, Nadia's heart ached as if twisted by a knife. After the prayer ended, Lisa pleaded, saying it was rare for her to sneak out and she wanted to play a little longer before going back. If you want to look around, stay a bit longer. But the increasingly chilly weather made Nadia involuntarily tighten her clothes. Aiden noticed this and offered to escort Madame back herself. Jelly. The way they went back seemed to be the opposite direction, but Lisa didn't think much of it. Along the way, Nadia chatted with Aiden, off and on. Just then, a loud shout suddenly stopped the two of them. A dense crowd of fully equipped soldiers suddenly appeared before Nadia's eyes. Before Nadia could speak, the leading captain revealed his identity and asked Madame where she was going. I'm going back to my room. Is there a problem? Unexpectedly, Madame Gray suddenly rushed out from the crowd and accused Nadia of lying. Did you think I didn't know you wanted to sneak out of the city in the middle of the night? She then took out a letter. Look at this. Do you still want to deny it? This is just a reply letter to my father. And the contents of the letter are nothing more than ordinary greetings. I knew you would say that, little girl. We'll see how you defend yourself in a moment. Madame Gray had her subordinate hand over a candlestick. As the letter slowly approached the flame of the candlestick, a line of small text faintly appeared at the bottom of the letter. My mission is complete, I will. Leave on the night of the full moon. Writing on paper with lemon juice. The words will appear as soon as it's roasted over a fire. These are all your southern little tricks. Did you think you could hide it from me? Nadia, however, calmly explained that she had never written these words. Someone is deliberately framing me. Seeing that she still wanted to deny it, Madame Gray turned around and called for the former marquise. Attending physician, but she didn't expect that the people who arrived included not only the attending physician, but also Gerent and Adjutant Keith. The physician hesitated for a moment before stating the former Marquis's current condition. Ever since Madame visited this morning, the Lord former Marquis has had a persistent high fever. If this continues, his life might be in danger. At this moment, all fingers were pointed at Nadia. But even so, Nadia did not show a trace of panic, as if all of this was proceeding exactly according to her plan.